Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea reports a rise in new cases of COVID-19, though it's still in the range it's been. The authorities are worried about it spreading this weekend when churches celebrate Easter. Traffic is flowing again through the Suez Canal now that the ship blocking it has been freed. A relief to investors, manufacturers, and retailers. The backlog of ships, though, is considerable. And the North Korean leader's sister, Kim Yo-jong, has a new role as second in command at the regime's propaganda department. It shows that despite a demotion she took this year, her position is still quite powerful. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. We start with the latest on COVID-19 in South Korea. New cases are back up today, so the authorities are pleading with people to stick to the distancing rules and other precautions. There's concern about the virus potentially spreading this next weekend at churches celebrating Easter. Jonguns reports.
South Korea reported 447 new COVID-19 cases on Tuesday. Among those cases, 429 were transmitted domestically. 18 came from overseas. This puts the daily number of infections back over the 400 mark after it had briefly dropped below 400 on Monday. With strengthened prevention measures that kicked off this week, health authorities have asked citizens to voluntarily and thoroughly abide by the rules.
Many are tired and worn out due to the continuing COVID-19, with seemingly no exit at the moment. But your active participation in prevention measures is the most important part of K-quarantine. We must go back to the basics, especially with all the uncertainties. We urge you to make it a habit of keeping to the COVID-19 rules at all times wherever you are.
He added that the effect of the vaccination rollout will be maximized along with public's active participation in COVID-19 prevention measures, which will also minimize economic damage until herd immunity is produced. His comments come amid a resurgence of the virus in countries worldwide, including the U.S., which is facing a possible fourth wave with its social distancing measures, as well as Germany, where local governments are ramping up stricter bans. With Easter and the upcoming by-elections next month in South Korea, authorities are on high alert regarding further spread. Many of the recent cases have been concentrated in public facilities such as bars, singing rooms, workplaces, and churches. Jonguns, Arirang News.
The South Korean government has launched a service to keep people up to date on the vaccine rollout, letting them know when and where they can get it, making appointments for them, and sending reminders. They're calling it the Public Secretary. It's not an app, but rather works within services we already use, like Naver and the messaging app KakaoTalk. Kim Yo-jong reports.
Starting April 1st, South Korea will ramp up its vaccination program by rolling out COVID-19 vaccines to people aged 75 and up. But for many, finding out when they'll receive the shot and what to be aware of after the jab is not so easy. To help these people, the government has developed a service called the Public Secretary. Through this service, people will be able to receive notifications on their vaccination information through channels including Naver, KakaoTalk, and Tues. People can register for the service while making reservations for the shots through a public official. A day before receiving the jab, the vaccination date and location will be confirmed via message. On the day of vaccination, information on precautions will be provided, and 3 days after the shot, people will receive instructions on how to cope with any adverse reactions. 3 weeks prior to the second shot, people will be informed to make advance reservations. And again, people will receive notifications a day before, on the day, and 3 days after the second vaccination. In total, people will receive information 7 times until the inoculation process is complete.
At least we think that people will not miss out on the time, place, and other essential information regarding vaccinations. And we think that vaccinations can be made much easier and more conveniently for all citizens.
In addition to information on COVID-19 vaccinations, the service also notifies people with 7 other types of frequently used administrative information, such as those related to traffic fines, driver's license renewal, and health checkups. People can make payments directly through the service as well. The Ministry of the Interior and Safety plans to improve the service by considering the public's opinion and will also increase convenience by adding 30 more types of information. Kim Yo-jong, Arirang News.
This week, South Korea is paying out relief money to small businesses and freelancers that have been impacted economically by the pandemic. President Moon Jae-in today called for these funds to be paid out swiftly so that the country can achieve an inclusive economic recovery. Here's the president at this morning's cabinet meeting.
4차 재난지원금이 한시라도 빠르게 지급될 수 있도록 속도를 내고 새롭게 추가된 농어민에 대한 지원도 신속하게 집행될 수 있도록 각별한 노력을 기울여 주기 바랍니다.
The government started making the payments on Monday, funded by a $13 billion extra budget. The president stressed that the country is making strong progress toward a recovery, pointing out that the IMF has raised South Korea's growth forecast for this year by half a percentage point to 3.6%. Also, to support the recovery, Moon called for thorough virus prevention measures. He noted that vaccinations for the general public will start next month and called on the government to speed up the process and to administer them to people in an order that is fair. New data suggests that economic conditions in South Korea are keeping grown adults from leaving the nest. Among South Koreans who are single in their 30s, around half still live with their parents. That's according to Statistics Korea, which puts the figure at 55%. And among singles aged 40 to 44, it was 44%. Also up to age 44, about 42% of unmarried people living at home don't work. An official at Statistics Korea attributed these trends to unemployment among young people and the soaring price of homes. There's finally movement through the Suez Canal now that the massive container ship blocking it has been moved out of the way. The ship had been stuck there for nearly a week, causing a jam that threatened to wreak havoc on the global supply chain. Kim Jae-hee reports.
The giant container ship Ever Given that had been stranded in the Suez Canal is finally free after being stuck for nearly a week. Egypt's Suez Canal Authority said on Monday local time that Ever Given was successfully refloated and that marine traffic in the canal will resume. The dislodging comes after rising tide helped tugboats shift the vessel. The international maritime community was reassured by the news. The massive container ship had been stuck blocking the vital waterway since last Tuesday, causing disruption to global shipping. Hundreds of trapped vessels have been waiting in agony to restart their journeys, with every passing day blocking an estimated $10 billion in trade. As traffic resumes in the Suez Canal, stranded ships are expected to be allowed through on a first-come, first-served basis. The traffic jam in one of the world's biggest trade routes is likely to be cleared in the following days. Meanwhile, Russia's Sputnik news agency says Egypt will demand compensation from the owner of the Ever Given for all the consequences of the grounding of the vessel, such as the full cost of the use of tugs. Sputnik cited the Egyptian president's aid on the development of seaports and the Suez Canal as its source. The accident is estimated to have cost Egypt around $14 million a day. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for coming on today.
Good afternoon.
Well, the Biden administration will soon unveil a plan to spend around $3 trillion on infrastructure to get people employed and make some much-needed improvements to things like roads and bridges. Also includes a lot of money for social programs. Some have likened it to the New Deal, which, of course, helped the American economy through the Depression. So tell us about this plan and what you think its potential impact on the economy might be.
Yes, the President Joe Biden will lay out the sweeping two prolonged infrastructure planned and the job proposal on Wednesday, with the administration launching its expected month-long efforts to pass the proposals that will total somewhere between $3 trillion to $4 trillion worth, according to the senior administrators officials. Biden, who will detail the infrastructure and climate related proposal, in Pittsburgh is set to focus on repairing the physical infrastructure of the country while pushing for significant investment in climate infrastructure and research and development. Basically, this will cause the significant increase in the GDP growth rate for U.S. A lot of people are expecting that GDP growth rate will pick up to at least 6.5% this year. Some cases, they're estimating well above 8%. Obviously, the sector-wise, this kind of effort would have positive implications for the industrial sector and consumer sector, including the staple and discretionary consumer sector. And it seems that the share price are moving accordingly. However, though, this kind of aggressive measures would result into some additional pressure for inflation. And it seems that the 10-year government bond rates will be rising quite rapidly at this point. Right now, the futures market for the bond rate is hitting 1.77%, which is a record high in a year or so. So all in all, economy is moving in the right direction. However, though, it is causing some inflationary pressure, and that seems to have positive implication for the industrial sector and consumer sector, but for the growth sector like NASDAQ seems to be showing some correction in the futures market.
And turning to the markets, stocks on Wall Street were mixed on Monday. The Dow closed at a new all-time high, but tech shares sent the S&P and the NASDAQ lower. What's happening in the global markets?
Right. There was quite a lot of news in regards to the defaulting hedge fund in U.S. That has resulted into 10-year Treasury yield rising quite sharply, and it seems to be continued to rise. There have been quite a significant amount of block deal happening, and resulting into the possibility of a failure of family office, Archgo Capital, which is actually a Korean-American led family house. And it seems that a lot of volatility is happening in regards to the growth sector, particularly U.S.-listed Chinese shares, including the internet names. So overall, it seems that there's a continuation of uncertainty regarding the U.S.-China relations and the companies who are listed in U.S. By China. All in all, though, if you look at the COVID-19 cases and the overall inflation pressure coming from the fiscal policies and infrastructure policies, we think that the economy is moving in the right direction. Still some doubts happening, so therefore you're not seeing the overall all the markets rising. The indices for, say, Dow Jones and S&Ps and NASDAQ and small cap, they are kind of rising in specific cases. Yesterday we saw Russell 2000, which is small mid-cap, falling by 2.5% plus. Clearly there's uncertainty in regards to the high interest rate might have negative implications for some of the weaker financial financial situations for the small mid-cap. So we need to watch closely how things progress. All in all, we do think the economy recovery will have positive implications for earnings growth for S&P 500.
And Korean stocks had a significant gain today across the board. The Kospi holding well above 3,000 and the NASDAQ almost hitting 960. What's the story in domestic stocks?
Right. The Kospi was up 1.12% and also Kosdaq was up 0.42%. One implication is that the foreign investors' net selling seems to be kind of dying down. Institutional sales continue to happen, whereas the domestic retail investors continue to be the net buyer of Korean market. Overall, economic growth rate expectation is actually rising. That results into greater economic growth rate means that greater earnings growth rate for the Korean companies. We are looking at 25% plus of the earnings growth for the Kospi 200 this year. Clearly, this is positive news for equity market. In terms of which sector or specific sector, they're showing a significant rise in earnings. Clearly, the auto sectors, semiconductor businesses, and some of the industrials and export-related. So if you look at the currency depreciation, that actually have positive implication for the exporters. So it seems that that's where the investors are focused at.
And now oil prices are up a little bit today. Of course, there's the ship in the Suez Canal being freed, which is key to the transport of oil. Another question, though, is the next decision by OPEC and Russia on production. What do you see happening with oil?
Yes, with the Suez Canal blocking traffic, that has resulted into quite significant rise of the oil prices. With the ship floating again, we expected the oil price to settle down, but it seems that it continues to be quite strong. Main reason for that is because of two reasons. Number one, Russia is saying that they will support stable oil output from the OPEC, and meaning that they'll continue to have a limited amount of supplies. So supply and demand side-wise, the economic recovery has positive implication, while the supply side remains to be quite intact. If that's the case, we think that with the global economic recovery happening, oil price might not fall further. Nevertheless, with the shale gas implications, overall production capacity for the global oil side is very strong. So even though there's a stronger demand for oil, we think that the supply and demand side will result into a bit of a range bound. So we are looking at oil price somewhere between $55 to $65 per barrel in a trading range over the next 6 months.
And before we go, Mr. Yu, I'd like to ask you about the upcoming jobs numbers in the U.S. Those are due out on Friday, and it'll be an interesting situation because the markets will be closed for Easter weekend. So what do you think the market's looking to see in these numbers, and any particular effect you think might happen because of the markets being closed that day?
Right. If you look at the overall interest rate, it is rising. As I said, it has hit 1.77% for 10 years bond rate. What that means is that the market is expecting that the unemployment number will be coming in better than expected, probably, meaning that the unemployment ratios remains to be around 6.2%, might fall to even below 6% if the unemployment ratio remains at below 6%. If it actually comes through, that means that you are looking at much more aggressive economic growth rate in the future.
Got it. All right, Mr. Yu, thanks so much for sharing your insights. As always, we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
The North Korean leader's sister, Kim Yo-jong, has now been named second in command at the regime's propaganda department. Back in January, she was taken off the Politburo, but her new role shows that she's still quite powerful. Kim Dami has the details.
Despite her demotion back in January, North Korea's Kim Yo-jong still remains powerful with her new title, the Vice Director of the Information and Publicity Department of the Central Committee of the Workers' Party. In fact, her new status is exceptional, given that the department is one of the regime's core divisions that represents the regime and its socialist ideology.
Her position is not the highest in terms of status, but because she shares the so-called Mount Baekdu bloodline, this adds more depth to the role.
Speculation about her position have been rife, but the North state-run news agency officially confirmed her new status for the first time on Tuesday. Though Kim has been notorious for issuing harsh comments on foreign relations, her role is still different and in fact broader than that of the North's top diplomat Choi Sun-hee.
While Choi plays the role of the official diplomat when it comes to negotiations between Washington and Pyongyang, Kim Yo-jong is the head of the areas related to Seoul and Washington and can also make political judgments.
On Tuesday, Kim slammed South Korean President Moon Jae-in for his remarks on the North's missile launches, saying his sentiments reflect Washington's gangster-like logic. Expressing deep regret over the statement, Seoul's Unification Ministry has urged the North to stay courteous and vowed to continue working for dialogue between the two Koreas. Kim had previously led the mood for reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula, directing inter-Korean businesses like during the Pyeongchang 2018 Olympic Winter Games. But with much of the inter-Korean dialogue frozen and intensifying tensions between Washington and Pyongyang, Kim Yo-jong is expected to continue to play the role of bad cop by delivering her brother's words through harsh and weighty statements towards Seoul and Washington. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
Since the military coup in Myanmar on February 1st, security forces there have now reportedly killed more than 500 people in their crackdown on pro-democracy protesters. Global leaders are condemning the junta and warning of sanctions. Kim Yo-jong reports.
At least 510 people in Myanmar have been killed by security forces since the military coup on February 1st. The country met its bloodiest day last Saturday when the death toll was reported to be at 141. Sai Wai-yan was a 13-year-old boy whose days were also cut short on Saturday by Myanmar's military forces. He's among the 35 children known to have been killed. His family and friends came together on Sunday to hold a funeral in Yangon. The international community has condemned the actions of Myanmar's military, including world leaders.
It's terrible. It's absolutely outrageous. And based on the reporting I've gotten, an awful lot of people have been killed totally unnecessarily.
The U.S. on Monday took action by temporarily suspending a trade deal with Myanmar. Meanwhile, the French foreign minister described the crackdown as blind and deadly. Jean-Yves Le Drian demanded an end to the violence and went further by warning that sanctions could be placed against Myanmar by France's European and international partners. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres also called for a firm and unified international response. Following the military airstrike on Sunday, thousands fled from the Karen state and took refuge in neighboring Thailand. But Thai officials have become the subject of criticism from activist groups by allegedly refusing the refugees. Kim Yo-jong, Arirang News.
In the United States and many other countries, if someone targets a certain ethnic or minority group in committing a crime, they'll often face a much harsher punishment. The concept of hate crimes has been in the headlines recently because of attacks on Asian Americans. But the concept has also been controversial, in part because people aren't sure when a hate crime has been committed. Our Kim Do-yeon spoke with a district attorney in the U.S., the person who serves as her local government's top prosecutor, to find out more.
Since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, racially motivated attacks against Asian people in the U.S. have increased. In New York City, 28 hate crimes against Asians were recorded in 2020, up from just 3 in 2019. And since January 1st this year, New York City already saw 28. Among the 5 boroughs in the city, the most ethnically diverse is Queens, which is also the most diverse county in the country. Its district attorney is no one new to hate crimes.
But over the last 5 years, just so you know, Asian hate crimes have increased also throughout this country. And so I don't want it to just seem like it's a passing phase. It's important, and we are working hard to prevent it.
But why is it so important to charge a suspect with hate crime?
For example, a murder. It's like murder is a murder. Why do people get punished more if it's racially motivated or is it if it's gender motivated?
Hate crime is purposely created to protect people so that they are not attacked simply because of standing there, because of what they represent. Sure, there could be significant difference in the time that you serve. But, you know, part of the other side of this is educating the public so that they understand what a hate crime is. And, you know, education is one of the key ways to, excuse the pun, but to attack hate crimes.
In fact, District Attorney Katz established a Bureau for Hate Crimes when she was first elected in 2019. But now, with more attacks after COVID-19, more people are speaking out and calling for the legal system to protect Asian Americans.
Right now, with COVID-19 going on, people are more sensitive, right? So do you feel more obligated to make sure that this is not a hate crime or this is a hate crime?
It is my job not to be political. It is my job as the district attorney to look at the evidence, to make out elements of a crime, if I can make it out. It has to be because it is the right thing to do and that legally it stands up in court. I mean, folks need to remember that if we charge something that isn't truly part of the crime, it'll never stand up in court anyway.
The NYPD also announced last week that undercover officers will be patrolling throughout the city to catch Asian hate crimes on the spot. This is also because, despite the significant growth of known cases, the authorities believe many go unreported. Kim Yo-jong, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.